Good evening. I am P.R. Miller. I'm also known as the Grizzled Wizard of Waste Not, Want Not. I have three primary identities in life. My first identity is that of a junk man. I was raised in a junkyard. The town dump was my playground as a child, and I earned my way through Akron University on the back of a garbage truck and then became a demolition contractor. My job as a junk man, quite simply, is to recycle, which we're not doing nearly enough of. My second identity is that of an artist. My degree from Akron University is in art education, and I have been involved in the arts since grade school. I do glass and ceramics and wood and almost every kind of art you can imagine except painting. I'm waiting until I get to be several hundred years old before I have to degrade myself to that point. The job of an artist is quite simply, an artist being a musician, a dancer, a poet, a writer of any kind, the job of the artist is to alter the viewer's reality. The quality of the artist is measured in the intensity of the reaction to the piece. Do you get a standing ovation, or do people throw rotten tomatoes at you? The purpose of the artist in creating that is to express their inner self and how they relate to the world, which is largely what this show is reminiscent of. My third identity is that of a wizard. The purpose of a wizard is, quite simply, to observe the flow of energy and direct it to its proper place, be it the light or the dark, makes no difference. It is a very difficult task at best, because people do not understand the purpose of wizardry. This show represents the wizardry that is inherent in all of these artists that are represented here. Coming into this show, I had never curated a show before. Indeed, I had no idea what it even meant to do so. So it's been quite a good learning experience for me, and of course that's what life itself is about, is having a learning experience. I have awarded the first, second, and third prize and 2 honorable mentions. I'm tempted perhaps to add another honorable mention depending on the poetic narrative that I requested as part of the entry. I believe that a poetic narrative is a bigger challenge to a visual artist, because most visual artists don't think in terms of their individual pieces as any kind of mental poetry. And so the idea was to challenge the artist beyond what they may have been accepted to in the first place. This first piece, which is an honorable mention, is due to several reasons. Number one, blue is my second favorite color, purple of course being the first. And it represents a dichotomy of what women were looked at 100 years ago versus today, and largely defined by an apron. We have certain politicians who think that women are supposed to be domestic housewives and things, and this is very representational of it. And as far as a painting goes, it's beautiful. Were I a person of discretionary income, I would buy this in a minute. This second piece has been chosen for an honorable mention for a number of reasons. Number one, the iconography of this particular poster, which was very prominent during World War II, has been adapted in a very contemporary political statement about the person behind the mask, which is, as you can see from the hairdo and the hat, a very well-known individual. And his particular purpose in life is stated very clearly in the narrative there. And so this piece is a very creative adaptation of history and the political statements of today as seen through the eyes of a woman who, although I don't know who she is yet, must have a very, very perhaps macabre sense of humor. I'm looking forward to meeting her on this. This is a very strong piece. This particular piece I chose for the third place award for several reasons. Number one, it's a very, very good photograph, and it expresses the attitude of these women who have overcome some extremely serious lifelong problems with their spouses who suffered from Alzheimer's disease. And that common ground of adversity has brought them together and has formed new relationships in their life, which obviously they take very seriously. In addition to being a good photograph, it is also a collage, which is primarily my own method of expression, taking things that are meaningful to them and incorporating the artist into trying to talk about the challenge of survivors. And so this speaks very well. It's very, very professionally done, and therefore is noteworthy in that regard, which is why I chose it for the third place. This is a piece I chose for second place, again, for a multiplicity of reasons. There are many disciplines of art represented here. It is a collage, but it is also a collage of paintings that were made by this woman, Margaret Catone, I believe is how it's pronounced, so an English woman who served in World War II very nobly in the English Army, married an American, moved to America, and raised quite a family. Her story is represented here. She apparently began to paint when she was getting older, which is what I'm waiting for, and obviously did some very, very good pieces of art. The flower things and the birds are where they might appear somewhat primitive, they are necessarily done from the heart. The statements of what a woman is all about, family and caring and life and history and loyal and strength and all of those things, that represents what women are supposed to be about. And the way it's presented with the embellishments of the frame speaks to me of an artist who takes detail very seriously, and therefore this piece has definitely earned second place. And I'm again, if I were much of an art collector, this is a piece that I would want in my collection. This is a piece that I selected for first place because it passionately speaks to everything that I do and everything that I am. When I first saw this, I thought somehow this artist had broken into one of my warehouses or rooms and stole all of my stuff, because I have all of this. I have this, what she calls an ironing board, is technically called a sleeve ironing board, because back when women were relegated to the sweatshops of laundries and stuff, they would put the sleeves of garments over these miniature ironing boards to do the ironing. I collect cigar boxes. I collect boxes of jewelries and chains and little tchotchkes and knickknacks and just all manner of things. So the things that are like a tree background are very much like extrusions from the Rubbermaid plants when I go in there, and I will use stuff like this, but on a much grander scale. So everything this woman has done, I'm assuming it's a woman because I was not shown the names of anything or anybody with any of these pieces. So I have no idea, male, female, but I have to assume it's a female because it's something that a woman would realize as iconography, however that word is pronounced, to show the different diversities of womanhood. And here again, this is a piece where I, to be an affluent collector of art, I would definitely have this in my collection because it's a first-class piece. Therefore, it won first prize. So, whoever you are, congratulations, and it's I definitely want to meet this person eventually. The theme of this show was 2020 Vision. It is a Femicentric show, and the 2020 Vision is a celebration of the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, and thereby beginning their journey to empowerment. I have, because of my mother and my grandmother, I have believed for most of my life in the supremacy of women. Certain things, not necessarily rules, but principles by which I live. Rule number one, do not argue with a woman. You're going to lose. Why even waste your time? Number two, don't ever say no to a woman, even if you don't know what you're doing. If she expects you to do something, you don't say, no, I can't do that. Say, sure, I'd be delighted to do it. What do you want me to do there? How do I do this? So that's how I got roped into this. But my early life, my mother was a very, very strong woman. She was a World War II dropout of school. And when I was in the third grade, I believe it was right about 1956 or so, I was homesick, and she called the principal of school to let him know that I wouldn't be there. And he told her to just keep me at home from then on because I was mentally retarded, and he didn't want me in his school anymore. Now, the reason he diagnosed me as being mentally retarded was because back in 1956, ADHD had not been invented, and I had very much difficulty in staying focused on one thing or another because life itself is so completely diverse. My mother knew that I was not mentally retarded because many of her girlhood friends who had children had Down's syndrome children. That is because Butler County, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, has one of the highest incidences of Down syndrome and brain disorders such as brain cancer in the nation due to a local chemical company that every Friday night burnt all of their waste product. And everybody loved it because it was like fireworks. The flames were red and green and blue, and it was great. The problem was that that chemical plant was completely surrounded by the largest dairy farm in the county that serviced every public school in the county. So within 4 or 5 weeks of this confrontation with the elementary school principal, my mother and her girlfriend got together and started one of the first schools in the state of Pennsylvania for mentally retarded children. And they ran it quite successfully for 4 or 5 years, and they were starting to get funding and this kind of thing. And the state of Pennsylvania got wind of what was going on, And they come in and they told her, due to the fact that she did not have a high school diploma or a college degree, she was not qualified to do this, and they forced her to shut the school down. Rather than give up, she decided that she would teach them a lesson or two. She went back and got her high school diploma. She graduated, as I recall, in 1964, 1 year before I graduated from high school. And then she entered Slippery Rock State College about the same time that I entered Salem College in West Virginia. And the race was on to see who got through first. Due to the fact that I transferred several times to the University of Oslo in Norway, the University of Guadalajara in Mexico, and finally to Akron University, I lost several years worth of credits. So she beat me to it. She graduated from college before I did. She then went on to get her master's degree. She was elected on the Board of Trustees of the Butler County Community College, and she served quite notably and admirably in that position, and she became an elementary school teacher at Haynes Elementary School over in Western Pennsylvania, and she was one of the most phenomenal teachers they had ever had. She would start her day by going into the basement of our house, where my father had installed for her a motorized dry cleaning rack which spun around with all the costumes and all the clothing that she had purchased from either Goodwill or Salvation Army, until she found something that appealed to her mood that day. She would hit the stop button, put on that costume, and then make her lesson plans on her way to school. And so her school students remembered her beyond anything that is even conceivable. When she died in the late 90s, her memorial service at the church was standing room only. Students, people who had been students of hers for the last 20 years or so, came from many different states. The one thing that she and my grandmother taught me, which is probably the basis for everything that I do, is quite simple. And as a wizard, when I go into schools and try to teach recycling and that type of thing, I always try to have the children reminded of just one thing. And that one thing is this: your imagination is the most important thing that you shall ever have, because it is your map to your personal future. Do not ever lose your imagination. I thank you very much for this time.